Rudy, obviously Israeli advocate. You see what's going on college campuses today. I believe there's a clip or even some headlines of what's going on out there that we can even put out there. I've gone on and said that I think that the Palestine protests, the campus protest, is the new BLM from 2020. In 2016, it was the Me Too movement. 2020, it was BLM. And 2024, it's Peace for Palestine, Gays for Gaza, the whole thing. The pro-Palestinian protests have disrupted colleges all across the United States. Here's some headlines. Columbia in New York City. Columbia protesters seize building as anti-war demonstrations intensify. Columbia University is now policy-making Senate votes for a resolution calling to investigate schools' leadership. Harvard, anti-Israel protests fly Palestinian flag in spot reserved for the American flag. Horror as GW, George Washington University protester carries Nazi final solution call for the extermination of Jews signs. And then ultimately, college kids are now finally, this is a Daily Mail article, are starting to, there's the woke college kids and basically the more sensible type who are basically saying, I can't do the Ivy League thing, and they're now transferring to Southern schools. I want to understand a few things. From your perspective, why are these college campuses protests happening? What do you think they're right about? What do you think they're wrong about?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, Columbia University is my alma mater. That's where I went to. Right out of the Army, I actually started university at UCLA before transferring to Columbia. And I realized that what was going on college campuses already then and even before my time, where there are groups that claim to be pro-Palestinian. And the reason I say they claim to be pro-Palestinian is because when Palestinians are dying by the thousands in the Syrian civil war, they don't talk about them. When they're by the hundreds of thousands of refugee camps in Lebanon and in Jordan, they don't mention them. When they're suffering under Hamas, when they're suffering under the Palestinian Authority, or on the border of Gaza and Egypt, there's no mention of them. They only talk about Palestinian suffering when it has to do with Israel. Now, of course, there's a lot of Palestinian suffering when it has to do with Israel. These are my cousins, so I care about them. But if you take instances of Palestinian suffering only when it fits your agenda, you remove the entire context as to how we even got into this situation, to understand it and to correct it, and use it as political ammunition to delegitimize my connection to the land and my identity. What's really going on is an attempt to convince the future political and intellectual class of the next generation, which is what universities create. The next politicians, the next businessmen, the next people in media are coming from the universities, and convincing them that if they want to make the world a better place, they have to be against Israel. Now, I realized this when I was at UCLA. I realized also that within the Jewish community, we had a lack of activism ourselves. You don't want to hear about black rights from KKK members. You don't want to hear about women rights from misogynists. So are the only people talking about Jewish rights are those that are anti-Israel and anti the Jewish people. So I went on Google and I typed in #1 most anti-Semitic university in North America. Columbia University was listed #1, as clearly was
and that's where you
still
went
a problem.
to school.
And I transferred there. And I created a grassroots student movement that wasn't right-wing, left-wing. A lot of our work was actually bringing in Israelis and Palestinians for people to understand. And our goal was to empower, to narrate, and to protect, meaning to empower our own core students, Jews and non-Jewish allies, to be able to stand up for themselves, narrate our story using a language that communicates who we are, and to make sure to counter any and every single anti-Semitic movement that existed. What's happening on college campuses is an attempt to indoctrinate the next generation and to manipulate the empathy that they have for legitimate Palestinian suffering, and to ride on that to give them a zero-sum game narrative that if you want to be pro-Palestinian, you must be anti-Israel. And the reality is, if you're anti-either population, you're anti-both, because there's no future where either will disappear.
So, very interesting. You Googled the #1 anti-Israel university.
Anti-Semitic university.
Anti-Semitic university.
Same thing.
I like saying anti-Israel or Jewish hate.
Yeah.
Your friend taught me that.
Yes. Because
anti-Semitic, what is Semitic? Like, Jews don't run around being like, Semites, we rule.
Right.
Semites is you come from a region.
Right.
You could be Arab and Semitic. So
Correct.
to me, it's a very loose terminology. Anti-Jewish.
Yeah, Jewish hate,
makes sense.
anti-Jewish.
Jewish hate, anti-Israel makes a lot more sense to me. So you Google this word, and Columbia University comes up. But then there's how many Jews in the world?
There's 15 million recognized Jews.
15 million Jews, okay? 6 million Jews were killed in the Holocaust. Outside of Israel, the most Jews are where? In the United States.
Correct.
But in the United States, the most Jews reside in New York City. There's about 1 million Jews who live in New York City. The vast majority of Jews live in major cities, New York City, LA, Miami, right, where we grow up. where Aaron lives as well now. 1 million Jews in New York City. Walk me through, so if you went to Columbia is in Harlem.
It's near Harlem, just
Near
south of Harlem.
I've spent time there. One of my best friends went to school there and actually went to medical school there. So I've spent time at Columbia. Walk me through how you think this works, this logic works. The most Jews outside of Israel live in the United States. The most amount of Jews that live in the United States live in New York. But in New York, Columbia University, the most amount of Jewish hate stems from. Walk me through this logic, if you can.
Well, let me give you some more numbers. In New York City, the Jewish population is 13% of the population, right? A minority. But yet over 60% of total hate crimes against any minority is specifically against the Jews. And that's before October 7th, for which anti-Semitism has skyrocketed in these different places. So it's clearly there's an obsession against the Jewish people. Now, you might first be surprised by where there's a lot of Jews, there's a lot of anti-Semitism. How does that make sense? Yeah. But if we look at the Holocaust, it really started out of Berlin. There are many Jews in Berlin as well. So it's not because you have many Jews in a place that is prone to not being going through some sort of anti-Semitic experience. Quite to the contrary. Usually societies reject the Jewish people and blame us for all problems, and they blame us in places where we exist. And that's what's happening also in New York.
So these student protests, I want to understand this. From your perspective, I asked you straight up, I said, do you have any pro-Palestinian friends? You said, Adam, I am that friend. I'm that. Why do you think these college kids, these woke, progressive college kids, as they're being labeled, are so anti-Israel and so pro-Palestine?
I guess I would take umbrage with the framing of the question because I don't know that they're anti-Israel per se. I think the demands of the college protests are very clear. They want their campuses to divest from Israel so long as the hostilities and bombardment in Gaza is going on. They want amnesty from any repercussions and punishment and fallout as a result of the protests. And they also want more transparency with Columbia's financial ties to Israel. I think these are reasonable demands that don't necessarily constitute anti-Israel sentiments.
Okay, so fair enough.
I'd like to respond to that.
Yeah, they're anti-war. Respond to this. Cue up that Joe Scarborough clip from Dave Rubin if you can. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So if that were the case, then I definitely agree that that would not necessarily be anti-Semitic, because I don't know one person in Israel that doesn't criticize the Israeli government. There's nothing wrong with criticizing a government, but we have to be specific. What are the policies that we disagree with? What would we like to see? What are the actions that we're against with? Not just these blanket terms and being against an entire society or country, but being specific with where the problems are. But when you look in college campuses, they're calling for the intifada. Intifada literally means to kill Jews. They're promoting Hamas terrorists, they're wearing Hamas headbands, they're pushing Jews out, they're preventing Jews from going to classes. So it's not just being pro the Palestinians, it's completely turned into being against Israel and against the Jewish people. And that's from every single Jewish experience on college campuses. My brother is at Columbia University. He's landing right now from the airport because he cannot go to classes anymore. So the situation that's erupted is basically he now has to take online classes because he's no longer safe to come into Columbia's campus. That's no longer a political statement saying we want to help the Palestinians come out of their situations. And so we're going to put pressure and we're going to target specific companies who profit from the war. So that's why we're against them. And even the boycotting, it's not boycotting of specific companies. It's boycotting of anything related to Israel, even a film, even a musician, even a person. Now, just because you're Israeli, we need to boycott you, right? You're an American. Would you want someone to boycott you because you might not agree with Trump or Biden or any president that comes around and they're against that person, and so now you're automatically associated to that? So it's presented on a surface level as it's pro-Palestinian, which I'm also that pro-Palestinian friend, right? I'm more than pro-Palestinian because Palestinians are my cousins. They're my family. Right, I'm pro-human life, but Palestinians are in even closer degree closer to me. But it's now being used as we're going to pretend to care about the Palestinian in order to really fulfill our goal and our agenda, which is to attack the Jewish people and delegitimize our connection to our homeland.
Whoa. If you like that one, click right here to watch the full SOSCAST. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel.